Elon Musk is touting this AI. He says, it's really, in a way, quite terrifying to see what it's doing.
This is the smartest AI in the world. Some of these things are just worth repeating. Like Grok 4 is PhD level in everything.
For 2,000 years, humanity has tried to identify the Antichrist, naming emperors, popes, dictators, and tech billionaires. Grok AI was fed every relevant biblical passage with one instruction: find the overlapping profile using pure pattern recognition, with no agenda or tradition. The result wasn't a name, but a detailed portrait specific enough to recognize and disturbingly close to the present day. Do you think this AI-generated profile could reflect reality? Yes or no? Let us know in the comments. Why AI changes this conversation. Every human interpreter who has ever approached the Antichrist question arrived at it carrying something: a denomination, a tradition, a conclusion already forming before the first verse was read. Catholic interpreters have historically read the texts through the lens of church authority and institutional continuity. Protestant Reformers read them through the lens of their conflict with Rome. Evangelical futurists read them through the lens of a dispensational timeline developed in the 19th century. Preterists read them through the lens of first-century Roman history. None of these are dishonest readers. All of them are shaped readers. The shaping happens before the reading begins, and it determines which verses feel central and which feel peripheral, which interpretations feel natural and which feel forced. Grok brings none of that to the text. When it was given Daniel, Paul, John, and Revelation and asked to cross-reference every descriptor of the figure the tradition calls the Antichrist, it treated them as 4 texts to be compared, the same way it would compare 4 historical documents describing the same person from different vantage points. It extracted every characteristic, every action, every timeline marker, and every contextual detail from each source. Then it looked for what overlapped. Previous attempts to identify the Antichrist have almost always worked by selection. A candidate is chosen first, consciously or unconsciously, and then verses are gathered that fit the candidate. Verses that do not fit are explained away, spiritualized, assigned to a different figure, or quietly set aside. The conclusion shapes the reading rather than the reading producing the conclusion. Grok reversed the process. It assembled the full profile from the texts first, without a candidate in mind, and then asked what kind of figure that profile described. The result is a composite portrait built from convergence rather than selection. Every characteristic in the profile appears in at least 2 of the primary sources. The characteristics that appear in all 4 sources are the ones that carry the most weight. And the portrait that emerges from that process is specific enough to be genuinely unsettling. The difference between human interpretation and Grok's analysis is the order of operations, and that difference produces a fundamentally different kind of result. What Grok was given. The texts fed into Grok's analysis were chosen for one reason. They contain direct, extended descriptions of a figure or figures associated with opposition to God, deception on a global scale, and the events immediately preceding a divine intervention in human history. Daniel 7 and 11, written around 165 BC, describe a figure called the Little Horn. Daniel 7 provides the political and temporal profile. Daniel 11 fills in the religious and geographic details. Together, they form the oldest extended prophetic description of the figure the tradition would later call the Antichrist. Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians, written around 50 AD, describes a figure he calls the man of lawlessness. This is the earliest New Testament text to address the subject directly, written before any of the 4 Gospels reached written form. Paul's description is theologically dense and includes details about timing, restraint, and the mechanism of the figure's eventual destruction that appear nowhere else. The letters attributed to John the Elder, written around 90 to 100 AD, use the term Antichrist directly, the only texts in the entire Bible to do so. John's usage is notably different from the political and apocalyptic framing of Daniel and Revelation. His Antichrist is theological rather than political, already present rather than future, and described as a spirit operating through many people rather than a single individual. Revelation 13 and 17, written around 95 AD, describe the beast. The beast imagery draws directly from Daniel 7, repeating numerical and symbolic details with a precision that signals deliberate literary connection. Revelation adds the economic control element, the mark system, and the false prophet figure that operates alongside the beast. Two older texts, Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, were also included as background material. Both describe historical figures, the Prince of Tyre and the King of Babylon, in language that exceeds what those figures could literally embody, suggesting that the authors understood these historical rulers as patterns or types of a deeper reality. These texts establish the prototype before the prophecy, the shape of the thing before the thing itself arrives. Grok's first task was to determine whether these texts were describing the same figure or different ones. The answer it found was neither simple nor clean. The 6 primary sources span nearly 8 centuries of composition and use different names, different images, and different contexts, and Grok's job was to determine how much of what they describe actually overlaps. Daniel's little horn. Daniel 7 is structured as a vision of 4 great beasts, each representing successive world empires. Among them, the 4th beast is the most terrifying, and from its 10 horns emerges a smaller horn, known as the little horn. This figure carries the central prophetic weight of the chapter, and the descriptors Daniel provides are precise enough to form a detailed profile on their own. The little horn rises from within an existing power structure. It does not appear as an external force. Instead, it grows out of the framework of established authority, emerging among the 10 horns. Its rise involves the displacement of 3 of these horns, indicating that its ascent requires the removal of rival powers rather than their cooperation. This detail emphasizes that the figure's influence is both internal and disruptive, reshaping the power hierarchy from within. The description of the eyes like a man is particularly striking. Whereas the other beasts are purely symbolic and animalistic, the little horn is marked by perceptive, human-like intelligence. Its mouth, which speaks great things, is equally significant. Speech is not incidental. It is a defining characteristic that signals both ambition and authority. This motif recurs in Daniel 11, underscoring that what the figure says is as crucial as what it does. The little horn wages war against the saints and achieves temporary success. Its authority is limited to a time, times, and half a time, widely interpreted as 3.5 years, paralleling the 42 months mentioned in Revelation. The power it wields is genuine but bounded, with a built-in expiration. This temporal limit frames the figure's activities within a specific prophetic window. One of the most detailed aspects of Daniel 7 is the attempt to change times and laws. The figure challenges not only people, but the very frameworks governing human life, the calendar, legal norms, and moral order. This reflects a claim to authority deeper than mere politics. It seeks to redefine the organization of reality itself. Daniel 11 develops the religious dimension implied in Daniel 7. This king exalts himself above all gods, disregards traditional human relationships, and venerates a deity associated with military might. He situates his palace between the seas and the holy mountain, geographically linking him to the Middle East and particularly to Jerusalem. Grok's cross-reference between Daniel 7 and Daniel 11 shows that the 2 chapters align on 7 of 8 key characteristics, suggesting they describe the same figure from different angles. Historical debate continues over whether this figure was Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the Seleucid king who desecrated the Jerusalem temple in 167 BC, or a future eschatological figure. Antiochus fits Daniel's profile almost perfectly, but does not match descriptions in Paul and Revelation, implying either partial fulfillment or a typological foreshadowing. Ultimately, Daniel provides the political skeleton of the little horn's profile: internal rise, removal of rivals, bounded authority, and defining speech, with subsequent texts confirming and expanding what Daniel established. Paul's man of lawlessness. Paul wrote to the Thessalonian church because they were confused and frightened. Someone had told them that the day of the Lord had already come, and Paul wrote to correct that misunderstanding. In doing so, he described two things that must happen before the day of the Lord: a great apostasy, a falling away from the faith, and the revelation of the man of lawlessness. The title Son of Destruction is the same Greek phrase used of Judas Iscariot in John 17:12. The connection is deliberate. The man of lawlessness is not merely a political tyrant. He is a betrayer archetype, someone whose destruction comes from within what should have been loyalty. He opposes and exalts himself above everything called God or worshipped. This mirrors Daniel 11, a direct textual parallel that Grok identified as one of the strongest cross-reference matches in the analysis. The temple claim is the hinge of Paul's description. The man of lawlessness seats himself in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. The exact nature of this temple has long been debated. A literal rebuilt Jewish temple in Jerusalem, the church as the spiritual body of Christ, or some future institutional religious structure familiar to Paul's audience. Grok noted that Paul's Greek phrase, temple of God, often refers to the community of believers, yet the echo of Daniel's abomination of desolation suggests a specific physical location is also intended. His coming is accompanied by signs and wonders that Paul explicitly calls lying. These phenomena are real enough to deceive. They work, and people believe them. The deception targets those who refuse to love the truth, indicating that the lying wonders are effective precisely because the audience is predisposed to believe what it wants rather than what is accurate. The restrainer is the most mysterious element and has generated sustained interpretive attention. Something or someone currently holds back the man of lawlessness. He cannot be revealed until the restrainer is removed. Paul says his original audience knew what the restrainer was, though he does not name it, leaving subsequent readers to infer. Candidates include the Roman Empire, the Holy Spirit, the Archangel Michael, or human government itself. Each has textual support and challenges. Grok concluded that no single interpretation resolves all the details and resisted forcing certainty. The destruction of the man of lawlessness is described with casual brevity. Christ destroys him with the breath of his mouth at his coming. After all the figure's power, deception, and global influence, the end is sudden and requires no battle. The anticlimactic quality of his destruction is part of the profile. Paul adds the betrayer archetype, the temple claim, lying wonders, and the mysterious restrainer to Daniel's framework, and his language about exaltation above every god is too precise to be accidental. John's Antichrist spirit. John's use of the term Antichrist in his letters is different from anything else in the primary sources, and the difference is important enough that it changes the shape of the overall profile in ways that are easy to miss if you move past John's letters too quickly. In 1 John 2:18, John tells his audience that they have heard the Antichrist is coming, but that many Antichrists have already come. The plural is significant. John is not describing a single future figure. He is describing a pattern, a posture, a spirit that was already operating in his own time and expressing itself through multiple people simultaneously. This is not the political ruler of Daniel or the apocalyptic beast of Revelation. This is a theological disposition that had already infiltrated the community John was writing to. The source of these antichrists is the detail Grok flagged as the most unsettling in John's letters. They went out from us. They were not pagans, not foreign enemies, not outside opponents. They were insiders, members of the community, people who had been part of the fellowship and then departed from it, and in departing, revealed something about what they had always been. The Antichrist spirit, in John's framing, emerges from within the community of faith itself. It is an apostasy pattern, not an invasion pattern. The doctrinal content of the Antichrist spirit in John is specific. It denies that Jesus is the Christ. It denies the Father and the Son together. In 1 John 4, the test is whether a spirit confesses that Jesus came in the flesh. The Antichrist spirit denies the incarnation, the foundational claim that God took on a human body. This is a theological marker, not a political one. John is not describing someone who opposes Christianity from the outside. He is describing someone who operates inside theological language while emptying its central claim of content. The structural finding Grok identified here is the most complex in the entire analysis. John's Antichrist and Paul's man of lawlessness share the apostasy element, the emergence from within what should have been faithfulness. They share the deception element. But John's figure is already present, multiple, and primarily theological, while Paul's figure is future, singular, and primarily political religious. Grok's honest assessment was that these may be describing two related but distinct aspects of the same reality: the spirit that operates now through many, and the singular figure who will embody that spirit at its fullest expression at a specific future moment. The overlap between them is real. The gap between them is also real. Both need to be held without collapsing one into the other. John's letters add the dimension that no other source provides. The Antichrist is not only a coming figure, but a present spirit, already operating, already inside the community, already denying the thing that matters most. Revelation's beast. Revelation 13 opens with a striking vision, a beast rising from the sea. It has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns on its horns. Anyone familiar with Daniel, 7 recognizes the imagery immediately. The deliberate echo is one of the strongest signals in the entire Bible that the authors of these texts understood themselves to be describing related realities across centuries of distance, weaving a continuous symbolic framework rather than producing isolated visions. The beast receives its power directly from the dragon, who is identified in Revelation 12 as Satan. The authority it exercises is real but delegated. One of the beast's heads suffers a wound that should have been fatal, yet it is healed, and the whole world marvels and follows. This death and revival motif has generated extensive debate, and Grok identified it as a deliberate structural parody of Christ's resurrection. Just as Christian theology emphasizes that the world should follow Christ because of the death that culminated in resurrection, the beast commands awe and allegiance because of the wound that was healed. The beast imitates the defining event of the faith it opposes, twisting it into a counterfeit spectacle of power. The authority granted to the beast lasts for 42 months, or 3.5 years. Daniel's prophecy describes time, times, and half a time, which is the same period. The numerical match across texts written roughly 6 centuries apart is exact. Grok flagged this as one of the most compelling convergence points in the analysis, not as proof of prediction, but as evidence that the author of Revelation was deliberately operating within Daniel's framework, extending and transforming it, rather than inventing something wholly new. The beast's influence is explicitly global. It is given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. This global reach excludes any ancient historical candidate from full fulfillment. The Roman Empire, despite its size, did not exercise literal authority over every language and nation. Revelation's vision, therefore, anticipates a level of control beyond any known ancient empire. Grok highlighted this as the defining factor distinguishing full fulfillment from partial historical approximations. Economic control emerges through the false prophet, the beast from the earth, who looks like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. He enforces a system in which no one can buy or sell without a mark tied to the beast's name or number. The infamous 666 calculation, often linked through gematria to Nero Caesar, is one of Revelation's most debated details. Yet Grok noted that the global economic surveillance described could not have existed in any pre-modern context. Revelation 17 introduces the harlot, a city that rides the beast, representing the religious and economic systems it supports and eventually destroys. The 7 heads signify 7 hills, pointing to Rome, and 7 sequential kings. 5 have fallen, one is yet to come, and the beast is the 8th yet belongs to the 7. No single interpretation resolves all these geographic and sequential details perfectly. What Grok assembled. After working through every primary source, Grok assembled a master characteristic list, built only from details that appear in more than one text. The resulting profile is not an interpretation. It is a convergence map. Politically, the figure rises from within an existing power structure. He is not an outsider who conquers from outside the system. He emerges from inside it and works through it. He removes 3 rival leaders on his way to consolidated power. He achieves global political authority, not merely regional dominance. And his peak authority lasts for exactly 3.5 years before his destruction. Religiously, he commits the act Daniel calls the abomination of desolation, a desecration of the holy place that triggers the final sequence of events. He claims divine status, whether by seating himself in a temple and declaring himself God, or by demanding the kind of worship that belongs only to God. He denies the core theological claims about Christ, and he emerges from within the community of faith through apostasy, rather than arriving as an obvious external enemy. Supernaturally, his power is directly granted by Satan. He performs signs and wonders that are real enough to deceive at a global scale. He undergoes or mimics death and comes back, producing a worldwide response of loyalty and awe. He was restrained before his revelation by something or someone whose removal signals that the timeline has entered its final phase. His communication profile is one of his most consistent signatures across every source. He speaks with a mouth that Daniel, Paul, and Revelation all flag as a defining characteristic. He is boastful, blasphemous, and persuasive. He deceives on a scale that crosses every cultural and linguistic boundary. He controls the economic system in a way that makes ordinary life impossible for those who refuse his mark. The detail Grok called the most haunting across the entire composite is not any of these. It is the convergence of the emergence from within detail across multiple sources. He comes from inside the power structure, not outside it. He comes from inside the faith community, not outside it. He looks like a savior. He performs the kind of wonders people want to believe. His destruction of 3 rivals looks like consolidation. His desecration looks like devotion. The profile is specifically designed to be mistaken for the thing it opposes. The composite portrait is specific enough to be recognizable, and designed, according to every source that describes it, to avoid being recognized until it is too late. How the profile fits and doesn't. Every major Antichrist candidate in the history of this discussion fails the composite profile at some point. These failures are not minor, they are structural. Antiochus IV Epiphanes aligns closely with Daniel's prophecy. He rose from within the Seleucid power structure, eliminated rivals, exalted himself above the gods of his fathers, desecrated the Jerusalem temple in 167 BC by erecting an altar to Zeus and sacrificing a pig, and persecuted Jewish believers for a defined period. Scholars often view Daniel 7 and 11 as fully realized in Antiochus because the historical fit is striking. Yet he fails to meet Paul's description in 2 Thessalonians, written roughly a century and a half later, and does not satisfy Revelation's vision of global authority. he did not control a universal economic system, and his influence was regional rather than worldwide. The fit with Daniel is real, but the failure beyond Daniel is equally undeniable. Nero Caesar produces the 666 calculation through Hebrew gematria, and Revelation 17's depiction of a beast that was, is not, and yet will come, resonates with first-century tales of Nero returning from the dead, known as the Nero Redivivus legend. Rome as the city on 7 hills matches Revelation 17's geographic reference. However, Nero's actual authority was not global. His persecution lasted only about 3.5 years, and history records that he dies permanently, with no resurrection or revival. The parallels are suggestive but partial, leaving significant gaps. The papacy interpretation, central to the Protestant Reformers, aligns with certain aspects of Paul's temple reference, especially if the temple of God is read as the institutional church. Apostasy is visible in the Reformation critique of medieval Catholicism, yet no pope has exercised authority simultaneously over the world's political, military, and economic systems for a fixed 3.5-year period as Revelation requires. Grok's modern composite profile, constructed purely from the textual descriptions without targeting historical figures, points to a leader with global reach, rising from Western political and religious structures, exercising both religious and political authority simultaneously, commanding cross-boundary communication and media presence, and producing signs persuasive in a technologically saturated world. Grok's structural conclusion is uncomfortable. No single historical figure satisfies all 4 primary text profiles simultaneously. The options are that the texts describe different figures with overlapping traits, that the fulfillment is still future, or that the pattern is unfolding in ways difficult to perceive from within it. Every historical candidate fulfills part of the profile and fails the rest, suggesting either a future fulfillment or one so near that perspective itself obscures clarity. The Preterist versus futurist problem. The 2 dominant frameworks for reading the Antichrist texts are Preterism and futurism, and they produce almost completely opposite conclusions about what the texts mean and whether they have been fulfilled. The Preterist view holds that the prophetic texts were addressed to their original audiences about events that would happen within their generation or the immediately following ones. Daniel's little horn was Antiochus. Revelation's beast was Nero, or the imperial Roman system. The abomination of desolation was Titus's destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. On this reading, the texts have been substantially fulfilled, and their primary relevance today is theological and ethical rather than predictive. The futurist view holds that the texts describe events still in the future, that a literal 7-year tribulation is coming, that a literal rebuilt temple in Jerusalem will be desecrated, and that a specific individual who fits the full composite profile will emerge, achieve global power, and be destroyed at the return of Christ. On this reading, the texts are primarily predictive, and their primary relevance today is watchfulness for the signs of the approaching fulfillment. Grok's finding on this question was the same kind of finding it produced on the pre-tribulation versus post-tribulation question in the earlier analysis. Neither view fits all the texts cleanly. The Preterist reading handles Daniel and much of Revelation's early imagery well, but struggles with the global authority language that exceeds anything the Roman Empire actually embodied. The futurist reading handles the global authority language well, but requires a gap in Daniel's 70 weeks, and a series of events, a rebuilt temple, a single world government, a universal economic control system, that have not yet appeared. The most textually honest position Grok identified was a dual fulfillment framework. The texts have historical types, real first-century figures and events that partially embodied the profile, and they point toward a future antitype, a full embodiment of the profile that the historical types anticipated but did not completely realize. John's Antichrist spirit is the bridge between these 2 readings. The Spirit was already present in the first century. The singular man Paul describes may still be coming. Both can be true simultaneously without contradicting each other. Neither the preterist nor the futurist reading satisfies all the texts, which suggests the most accurate framework holds both a fulfilled type and a still approaching antitype at the same time. The haunting conclusion. The word haunting in the title carries weight that it earned through the analysis rather than being placed there for effect. Here is what earned it. Grok assembled a profile from texts spanning 8 centuries of composition, written in 3 languages by authors who never met each other. The profile is internally consistent across those centuries in a way that is unusual for any body of literature produced without a central coordinating editorial process. The characteristics converge rather than diverge. The later texts build on the earlier ones rather than contradicting them. The figure that emerges from the composite is too specific to dismiss as myth and too complete to fit any single person in history. What makes it haunting is not the profile's complexity, it is the profile's logic. The figure it describes is not obviously evil. He is convincing. He comes with wonders people want to believe. He emerges from within the system people already trust. He looks like a solution before he reveals himself as a problem, and the texts suggest the revelation comes too late for most of those who followed him to reverse course. The most specific detail across every source is not the 666 or the 42 months or the temple claim. It is the emergence from within pattern. He rises from inside the power structure. He comes from inside the faith community. He looks like a lamb while speaking like a dragon. The warning the composite profile encodes is not about recognizing a monster. It is about recognizing something that has learned to look like the opposite of what it is. The spirit John describes is already operating. The pattern Paul describes is already established. Whether the singular figure the texts point toward is still future or already in early motion is a question the composite profile cannot answer. What it can say, and what Grok found it says with unusual consistency across every source, is that the pattern has a shape. The shape is recognizable in principle, and the design of the thing is specifically intended to make recognition as difficult as possible in practice. The haunting is not that we cannot identify the Antichrist. The haunting is that the profile is specifically constructed to ensure we are not certain we have identified him until the moment when certainty no longer helps. The portrait Grok uncovers is complete, yet unsettling, always visible, never fully embodied. The texts lay out the pattern. The figure may or may not have appeared. If this sparks your curiosity, subscribe now. Dive deeper, question more, and follow us as we unravel the mysteries these scriptures have kept hidden.